Hello and welcome to another episode of BattleChats. The BattleCON, Exceed, and Level 99 Games analysis show where I talk to you about concepts for our games. In the previous episode, we talked about Laugh's theory of the three types of fighting gamer and how that can help you better your game in all of our fighting card games. However, for this episode, I want to talk about one specific fighting card game, being BattleCON. Now I know, I make BattleCON content all the time. So why am I doing it now? Well, one important thing I want to talk about right now is that BattleCON Online is almost out. And by the time you're watching this video, it's probably out or very, very soon to be out. So the big question is, why this video at this time? Well, with the release of BattleCON Online on Steam, I feel like many players will make a lot of mistakes because they're new and have never played BattleCON before. I expect there to be a few or a lot of new blood coming in who have never played the physical version of this game, which means that they will make the same mistakes that many of our physical players made when they were first starting out. In fact, many of the mistakes I made when I was first starting out. So, to possibly help all of you new players listening and watching this video, well, here are my top 5 mistakes BattleCON beginners always make. Number 1. Not having a main. Now this might sound odd to you, but in a fighting game, you should probably have a main. And despite the fact that BattleCON presents itself as a board game, it is a fighting board game simulator, which means that a lot of fighting game principles still apply. So many people tend to make the mistake of continuously switching character all the time. And this isn't a bad thing when you're starting out. In fact, it's probably really good to try everyone in order to find somebody that you like. However, once you find that somebody, stick to them for at least 10 games. Many people will often make the mistake of, upon losing with their new character, decide to switch, thinking, maybe this character isn't for me. Well, that's a big mistake because you're curbing your own learning capabilities. You see, it's very important that you have a frame of reference. This is very important for any game of BattleCON. Now, it doesn't matter who your frame of reference is, so long as you have one. So, maining anybody on the cast will be quite useful to understand everybody else. Now, this frame of reference could be somebody like Cadenza, who's a slow heavyweight fighter. Now, once you've learned the ins and outs of that character, you can more easily understand how other characters operate. If you end up picking another heavyweight character, say like Caesar, you can then compare him to Cadenza and say, they're quite similar. They're slow, have a lot of stun guard, and hit really hard. However, at the same time, if you decide to pick a character who plays completely differently from your first character, say somebody like Serafina compared to Cadenza, you can still have that frame of reference. Serafina is much faster, more mobile, and has less power. These comparisons are quite useful as it gives you a baseline for understanding the game. And that baseline is very important so that you can better understand the basics and better understand who does what. Who's mobile, who has a lot of damage, who has a lot of range, who has a lot of utility. Not having a frame of reference is a death sentence for that understanding. So number 1, have a frame of reference and don't switch characters every time you lose. Number 2, attacking relentlessly. I understand. The game is called BattleCON, and the cards that you place down are called attack pairs. I get it. A lot of the game's terminology and a lot of the game's aesthetics and fantasy is about fighting. But fighting isn't always about hitting the opponent and dealing damage. Thinking about this in this way is problematic. You see, BattleCON is much more than just a fighting board game. It's also a strategic tactical game. This means that your strategy and your tactics really matter. It's not just about dealing the most amount of damage right now, it's about doing things that allow you to deal more damage later on. And usually that means gaining the correct positioning or doing moves that are less damaging but are more likely to hit. So at the end of the day, This is very much epitomized and symbolized by the dodge base. Many newbies disrespect this card because they look at it and say, it does no damage. Sure, I get to evade my opponent's attack, but I don't get to deal any damage, so it's even, right? Well, no, not really. Many a good BattleCON player will understand that Dodge's ability to move 1, 2, or 3 spaces isn't just about making the opponent miss, it's also about gaining the correct positioning. By placing yourself at the correct spaces on the board, that will further allow you to perform more attacks in a more varied arrayed space, gives you more options. Now, this is a very complicated concept, but just think about it this way. If you're playing a character who is primarily a melee ranged character, and you are far away from the opponent, what's better to do? Attempt to hit that opponent with a shot and then have no further moves next beat? Or play a dodge, make your opponent miss, and be in melee range for the next few beats? It doesn't take a genius to understand that sometimes sacrificing damage now can result in more damage later on. So don't disrespect dodge, and remember that it's not always about fighting. Number 3, math. Math is very important in BattleCON. In fact, it's probably the thing you'll be doing the most. You see, in BattleCON, a lot of your cards are actually just an amalgamation of specific numbers. Your style and base pair up to give you an attack with range, power, and priority values. Sometimes even have stun guard values on top. Now, this isn't a lot of complicated math. You're not going to be doing trigonometry or like limits and like denominations, whatever. It's simple addition and subtraction. However, many newbies tend to forget that certain things add up in certain ways, and sometimes they forget that their cards have specific values. I understand. This doesn't seem like that big of a mistake. It doesn't seem like something people would make often. After all, who miscounts 1 plus 1? I get that. But when you have to do all of those calculations in a real setting while fighting against a real opponent, it can be quite overwhelming and you can make basic mistakes. I've seen people multiple times, especially when it comes to the range stat, miss even if they had a guaranteed hit had they just calculated their numbers correctly. Remember, range is always taking the maximum and minimum values and adding them to the maximum and minimum values of the other card. Simply put, range plus 1 to 2 plus 1 to 4 is 2 to 6. Now that doesn't sound so complicated now, but imagine having to think about your opponent's cards, my cards, what my opponent will do, all while under this pressure of playing against a real opponent. So, take your time. Don't be too afraid to double check your math, and don't be too afraid to double check your range. Remember, range 1 is adjacent to you, not on your space. So, with all of that in mind, just take it slow, and remember, simple arithmetic can save you lives and win you games. Number 4, taking your sweet time. This might sound contradictory to my advice in the previous point, but this is very important for BattleCON Online. You see, unlike BattleCON physical version, which is a board game, BattleCON Online is a video game, which means that we had to adapt a few things to make it more viable as an online experience. Specifically, we've added timers to the game. Now this might not seem like a big deal, right? Instead of having 2 minutes to think for my attack, I only have 1 or 45 seconds instead. This is actually a really, and I mean a really big deal. Many of the physical BattleCON players, upon transferring to BattleCON Online, tend to make a lot more mistakes because of the time pressure. See, even if we only cut it back by 1 minute of thinking time, that's still technically half the amount of time usual players make. And if you're a slow player, like me, well, I usually take 5 minutes per beat. At least I used to take 5 minutes per beat while playing the physical game. So it's quite jarring to have a game of BattleCON where you're forced to think on your feet. Think fast. 1 minute might seem like a long time. In fact, 90 seconds might seem like a long time. But in BattleCON, it's absolutely too short. You have 15 possible attacks, 20 if you include the switch style in your game, comparing that to 20 possible attacks the opponent has, which essentially means you have to calculate around 400 different outcomes. And that's a lot to do in a minute and 30 seconds. So I suggest that as a newbie in BattleCon, don't worry too much about analyzing what your opponent can do, what your opponent will do, because usually you'll just end up making worse plays. The time pressure will get to you and you might accidentally time out, which will result in you playing whatever attack pair is currently highlighted. And this could mean that you accidentally play an attack pair that isn't even good in the situation you were in. So, don't take too much time thinking about your opponent's attack pair and instead play what you think will work and play what you think is a strong attack. Only when you have enough experience and understanding of the game can you start considering what my opponent might do versus what I will do. This is very important as the timer is a big deal. I highly recommend that you get used to the timer first before trying to making all of those analyses, or else you will start losing a lot of games. Trust me, I lost my first 14 games doing that stuff. Number 5. Not learning from losses. BattleCon is a skill-intensive game. And in fact, when it comes to BattleCon, the more skillful or better player tends to win more often. In fact, probably 100% of the time. But that has a negative flip side. With no RNG to blame, people feel that whenever they lose, it's entirely their fault. While I understand this sort of mentality, it's not really correct. You see, simply because you lost, it doesn't mean you were bad. It doesn't mean you did a lot of things wrong. It doesn't mean you're a bad player. It just means that your opponent was better. You see, there's many things to learn in BattleCon, and I have a lot of videos on this channel and a lot of guides on the official Level 99 Games website that teaches you about all of these complex things like parrying, positioning, parallel attacks, heuristics, and all of this stuff. This is a lot to learn. And it's just a lot to learn. It's very overwhelming sometimes. So, does that mean that if the opponent knows more of that you yourself are a bad player? I doubt. It just means that your opponent knows more, is more experienced, or has played the matchup more often than you. It doesn't mean that you're bad, it just means you could be better. So, what is it about losing that you should think about and look at? Well, as usual for fighting games, it's highly recommended you look back on the game and see where your mistakes are. This is very, very useful because BattleCon Online has a replay feature, which allows you to re-watch your older games. And this might not be very apparent, and this might not be very evident or very intuitive, but try watching your own replays. It's very different from a regular fighting game, or very different from any other game. See, during the game, you're under time pressure, you haven't seen the situation before, you haven't seen what your opponent will play. But you trust me, just trust me. By watching a replay of yourself play, without having the time pressure under your back, without having to worry about knowing what the outcome will be, what your opponent will do, you will be better able to analyze the situation and see where you made your mistakes. Trust me, it's really, really easy to spot your mistakes in a replay. It always happens to me when I make videos for this channel, you know, while I'm commentating and I'm, you know, playing on this channel for BattleCon, and then I make a mistake, I don't notice it during the video. But when editing and when I rewatch the video, it's so apparent. And I just think to myself, why did I ever play that attack? See, nerves and the time pressure can get you. So, look at your replays, and remember, it's not always because you're a bad player. Being a worse player than your opponent doesn't make you bad, it just means you could be better. And with that, I would like to thank you for watching this specific episode of BattleCHAT. If you have a specific topic you want to ask me about, please tell me in the comment section down below. It doesn't have to be about BattleCON, it could be about Exceed, Millennium Blades, Pixel Tactics, or any of our other games. Just tell me in the comment section down below. So I have a question for you. What do you think is your biggest mistake as a new BattleCON player? How are you enjoying BattleCON online? I would like to know, and tell me in the comment section down below. So without much else to say, thank you so much for watching, and thank you World of Indians. Thank you, and good night. Happy gaming!